Good morning, everyone. Can you hear us clearly? Hello, Katrina. Yeah, great. Thank you. Hi, Me. Okay.
Hi, Katerina.
Hi.
Okay, I think it's 9 already. All the speakers are here, so let's start. Ling, Miss Ling will be our host today. Ling, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, Katerina.
Yeah, we have Miss Giang already here. Em chào chị Giang. Hi, Giang.
Hi, Giang. I think you are muted.
Hello.
Okay.
Hi,
Hello.
Me.
Hello,
Yeah.
Everyone.
Yeah, we can hear you clearly. Is Hà here? Hà, are you there?
Em xin chào cả lớp nha.
Vâng, chào chị Mưa Lê ạ. Dạ.
Vâng ạ, vừa điện nó có tí trục trặc ạ.
Yeah. Yeah, we're waiting for one more speaker to start. Yeah, Katerina, just introduce a little bit. Today we have the majority of the participants will be from enterprise support organizations, where they want to know more about this topic. And since genderless investing is quite new concept here in the market, so people tend to understand why and how to really embed the gender lens into the decision-making process, not only for investing, but also for supporting activities. And that's why we have quite a good number of enterprise support organization representative over here. Yeah. Yeah, let me double check.
And Ning is from KisStartup, who is our partner in Vietnam, as I told you.
Yeah, we just say hi before.
Okay,
yeah,
great.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're waiting for her. I don't know whether there's any problem with her. Let me double check.
I can see her joining Ning. Hi, just joined.
Yeah, Ha, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes. Ha sent me a message that she'll be like 2 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, I'm here. She needs 2 minutes more because she's in the middle of some things.
Hi.
Very busy. The business busy. Oh, she's here.
Okay. Yeah, Ling, I think we can start now. Thank you.
Okay, so good morning, everyone, and welcome you to the webinar Genderless Investing, the Why and How. We sincerely thank you for spending your time to attend today's sessions. This is an activity carried out within the framework of the Việt Nam Canada Impact Exchange Forum on genderless investment. The project is supported by Canadian Embassy in Vietnam, ISEE COVID project, and SME Trà Vinh. The forum is organized by KisStartup and Spring Activator from Canada to promote impact exchange between the two countries, especially in 3 areas: export-import, genderless investing, and impact investment exchange. To better understand the activities of the forum, our team will send the link in the chat box, and you can know more about our activities in these areas. And in today's program, we are honored to receive 4 special distinguished guests: Miss Katerina Meloni, a Canadian angel investor; Ms. Giang Do, co-founder of Green Generation Joint Stock Company; Ms. Thái Hà, founder of NameZone. So do we have all the speakers here? Miss Ming.
Ling, I wanted to give you a heads up that I think you gave an incorrect introduction to Katerina's. So I'll ask Katerina to self-introduce a little bit later, but I think that the introduction was a little bit misleading.
Sorry. So before we start, I would like to invite Ms. Jamie Pat, Managing Director at Spring Activator, to share a few words.
All right. Thank you, Ling, for the introduction. And hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. My name is Charmy, and I'm the Managing Director of Spring in Southeast Asia. We are a global organization that exists to change the world through innovation. And we work with entrepreneurs, investors, ecosystem partners to help innovative companies to launch, grow, raise capital, and change the world. And how do we do this? So first, we provide business support for entrepreneurs. This would be like acceleration programs, network building, connecting founders to partners, to fund to talent. And another core piece of our work is actually training and connecting angel investors. Through our programs and angel network, we develop a rich database of investors across Canada. And so it allows us to connect companies to the right investors at the right time. We are a team of 40 people, and we have offices in Vancouver and Toronto, Canada. And our team is spread across Canada, the US, and now here with me in Southeast Asia. We're delighted to partner with KisStartup today and receive the support of the Canadian Embassy to organize today's Gender Lens Investing webinar. And I have with me here Katerina Maloney, and I'd love for Katerina to jump in and maybe give us an introduction about yourself.
Yes, thank you, Trami. Very pleased to be here. Thanks. Glad to meet everyone. So in terms of the introduction, I'm not a Canadian angel investor. I'm actually originally from Italy, but I am an angel investor. So there was just a slightly, it was mostly correct. Let's put it that way. I run an advisory firm called Connecting Founders, where I fundamentally advise institutional funders and development agencies such as the Asia Development Bank and different foreign governments in their gender lens investing strategies, but also working with financial institutions on how they can increase their lending to women-owned businesses. So I've been working in the gender lens investing space for the past 15 years. I routinely work also in Vietnam, so I have an understanding of the markets and some of the trends and challenges in the market. So I'm happy to also learn from you as we go along. Yes, and then as mentioned, I'm part of a collective of female angel investors. It's called Epic Angels. It's based in Singapore, but it actually has members from all over, including North America. The angels are women only, so there is a specific purpose, a specific goal to get more women to invest. But actually the investees are not only female founders, they can be mixed teams, and also you have the occasional male founders that is supported by the investor network. I'm gonna leave it like this for now, and then happy to answer any question later. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you, Katerina. I'll give it back to Ling to introduce maybe the other two guest speakers.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Chami. So, Ms. Yang Do, do you want to introduce a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Zhang from Green Generation, a social impact business. Apart from being a social entrepreneur, I also acting as a mentor, coach, and investor, mostly for startup in rural, in women startup, and also startup from rural areas of Vietnam.
Thanks, Ms. Zhang. And what about you, Ms. Tai Ha? Do you have any introduction about yourself?
We can hear you. You are muted.
Could you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Ha. And I'm the founder of NameZone. And the NameZone, the business model starts from 2016. And that's all. Thank you.
So in the next part, I would like to invite Ms. Chami and Ms. Ming to moderate the webinar.
Yep. Thank you very much, Ling. So I'll be the host with this panel discussion. Thank you very much, Katharina and Ms. Zhang and Ha for your introduction. Briefly, I would say that this will be very exciting session. Why? Because we have Katharina with 20 years of working in gender lens, where the gender lens is quite new concept here in Vietnam. So you'll be discovering from her what is it and how. At the same time, we also have a couple over here. Why is the reason why I say couple? Because we have an investor and investee at the same panel. Ms. Zhang invested in NameZone in Thái Ha's company. So they will tell us the story of insider. So I'll be starting with Katharina first. Could you very briefly and simply saying what is a gender lens in general and how gender lens has become a strategy for businesses, investors, and startups?
Okay, yes, let me try to put it in a very simple way. So fundamentally, the name gender lens, it really came from the fact that you just put a lens through your investment strategy, your business strategy, where you pay particular attention to how you're impacting women. Normally, you call it gender lens investing, but we are actually referring to women. And then very practically, when you are in investors, that means that you want to achieve some positive impact to women. And you can either do that in two main ways. Either you invest in female founders, so women-owned or led businesses, or two, you can invest in what they call women benefiting companies, which are companies that can be led by mixed teams or can be led by male founders, but they are impacting women in a positive way. So they're reaching women, they're bringing something to them, whether it's women as consumers, women are suppliers, as employees, etc. So these are usually the two broad categories. When people say that they are gender lens investors, then they will be doing either one or the two or both.
So does that mean that it's both woman-led and woman-served enterprises?
Yes. So this is actually this is an interesting discussion because I personally think that so the reason why also there is so much attention to focusing on women and then targeting women is because also it was found that, first of all, every gender diversity is very beneficial for the company's bottom line. Actually, there is a lot of research that shows that if you have diversity of opinion brought by a combination of women and men in decision-making positions, the companies tend to do better in terms of operational performance and financial performance. So that's one of the reasons also why people starting to pay more attention. And also because the reality of it is like when you're serving customers, it's typically there are different needs and preferences. They are by gender, they are by level of income, they are by level of education, etc. It's actually quite common when you are a business, you need to segment your customer base because you need to understand what people are looking for in terms of your products and services so you can tailor them. But for a long time, I think people didn't really pay attention to this concept of gender. They didn't really make a difference whether it's a woman or a man. And I think by now it's pretty clear that there are differences. Also, for example, when it comes to financial services, when it comes to what people need. So I would say the most straightforward way, in my opinion, is to do gender lens investing by investing in female founders and women-led companies. Because and this is my opinion, nobody knows about women's needs better than women. I think women are the best place to solve these issues. But the reality of it is also when you're looking at building this sector, there are less female founders and there are less women-led companies than men-led companies overall. And so many argue that, okay, if you only focus on female founders, it would be too small of a segment. So let's just make it broader, and we need to be inclusive. So let's also focus on those male founders that are actually doing something positive for women. So hence the two categories.
Yeah, we see it now, but there is one question from the audience before that. Why is becoming a more, trendy to talk about gender lens right now? I mean, even after COVID. Yeah, can you elaborate more on that?
Why is it becoming? I think gender lens investing has been around for quite some time. I think originally. So the original, I think a version of gender lens investing started about perhaps 15 years ago. ISEE of the World Bank was one of the pioneering organizations doing that, because when they were doing work supporting commercial banks and other financial institutions lend to SMEs, and at that time when they had, let's call them gender neutral programs, so they made no difference between men and women, then when they started analyzing the data, they realized that women borrowers were not accessing finance the same way. There were some issues, and so they dig a little deeper, and they started understanding that having this type of gender neutral approach was not very successful, and they just needed to be more tailored in the way they offer their products and their services. I think now there is, because people are more aware of that, there is a lot of international research that shows that, and there is more interest. There is also more data available. For example, even in Vietnam now, you have data available about the one is the percentage of the SME sector that is owned by women and led by women. And then you also have data on how much the financial sector, mostly the banking sector, is serving women-owned businesses. So once you have, the problem is always when you don't have data, because then it's very hard to elaborate. But the moment you start having data and then you notice differences, then you realize that there are both gaps and opportunities at the same time.
It's great that you mentioned the gap and the opportunities. You may understand the Vietnamese market quite well. The gap in this market right now is in the pre-seed and angel in the capital market, where not many SMEs and not only women-led businesses, but startups in general, they don't have access to seed funding and loans from the banks. And Thái Hà used to start her business 6 years ago, and her first angel investor was Miss Zhang. So I would like to ask the question to Miss Zhang. Connect to what Katharina just said. Why did you choose to become an angel investor, and how did you really apply the gender lens into your investment decision? And you are more of a venture builder, right? So yeah, you're not only investing money, but also the companionship with your investee. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Ming. Actually, I did not choose to be an angel investor. It came quite naturally. I had a nearly 20 years banking experience before I became a social entrepreneur and set up my own business. So when I started my own business, it's very small, and we are social impact business, providing advanced biomass cook stove for the low-income people in the rural areas of Vietnam. And while doing my business, I realized that other small startup and small business really had difficulties in accessing finance, as well as know how to manage their resources in order to develop their business. I know somehow that I can help or I can add some value, but I didn't know how to. So I attended a training for mentors, investors, and trainers by British Council for the Social Enterprises, and where I met Ming from KisStartup, and she introduced me to a mentoring program organized by KisStartup, and that's the first time I become mentor. And also there I met her. I met her with her business. At that time, she was quite successful with her previous startup, but then reach a point that she need to restructure her business. So I just naturally become, thanks to Ming, I become a mentor, and then naturally become investor, and didn't know about gender lens and not anything. Yeah, it's just naturally that I think I can add value to small business and small startup. That's the story of between about name zone and her. About her, she will tell you later. But for me, because my cook stove business, we build it as an inclusive business model. At that time, we received a grant from UKAID and UKAID, and the business model in that program is inclusive business model, where we involve low-income people in the value chain. And because our product is a cook stove, so we work a lot with women. We work a lot with women in the rural areas, and I found out that the women are very in the local communities. They are very active. They can raise chicken for their families and sell some of the chicken they have in the local market in order to have money to buy some cosmetics or buy some other necessities. Some of them becomes retailers or even a trader for their small communities. So we have another project to work with. We got another grant from UN Foundation to work with Care International Vietnam through their savings microfinance programs in some of the provinces in Vietnam. And we use our cook stove as a tool to educate the women about raising awareness about climate change, harmful smoke, as well as gender issues like economic empowerment in the family. We even teach them about how to do business, how to do small business, and have their own income in order to improve their voice in the family. So I became more and more interested in women-led business. I didn't know the terms gender lens at all. Yeah. Through doing with a lot of group of women in the areas, I try their products for myself, and I know that a lot of products are good, but they cannot get access to the market. So I try to help them to get access to the market and introduce the products to consumers in the cities. So that's the whole story. It's about how I become angel investor, and women-led, investing in women-led business, and also have helped them not only investing, but I want to be as a mentor and grow together with them.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Lăng. Yeah, for those who are not very who has just joined. In fact, we have Katharina Meloni here and Ms. Lăng Do, Katharina has the experience in gender lens and also working with different organizations in gender lens embodiment, and also Ms. Lăng Do here as the an natural gender lens investor, and also she has invested and innovated a business model to invest in women. Yeah, I'll be briefing in Vietnamese a little bit for those who are not very comfortable with English discussion, just a very brief. Vâng, xin tóm tắt nhanh với các chị, nếu mà trong trường hợp mình nghe tiếng Anh thì nó sẽ có một chút khó khăn, thì bọn em xin tóm tắt lại một chút ạ. Thứ nhất là ở đây có hai diễn giả, một diễn giả là chị Caterina Meloni, là người rất là có nhiều kinh nghiệm trong việc đưa cái câu chuyện lồng ghép lăng kính giới vào các cái hoạt động và các cái quyết định của các tổ chức và doanh nghiệp và các chiến lược liên quan đến tài chính. Có chị Giang Đỗ ở đây là một nhà đầu tư thiên thần, nhưng mà việc đầu tư và làm việc với các doanh nghiệp nữ đến với chị rất là tự nhiên, và có một cái mô hình mà chị Giang Đỗ đã thực hiện rất là thành công, đó chính là mô hình mà tạo sinh kế cho phụ nữ thông qua cái bếp lò, và từ cái sử dụng cái bếp lò như một công cụ để vừa nâng cao nhận thức của phụ nữ và nâng cao quyền năng kinh tế của phụ nữ, cũng như là giúp cho các phụ nữ có sinh kế, nâng cao nhận thức cả về các vấn đề như là biến đổi khí hậu, và làm sao để bảo vệ sức khỏe, với những cái mô hình bếp của chị. Thì trong cái quá trình này thì chị Giang cũng đã đầu tư vào Nemzone, là một cái doanh nghiệp về đồ ăn healthy. Vâng ạ, và bây giờ tôi sẽ sang đặt câu hỏi với các chị Thái Hà. Yeah, now I turn to Ms. Ha for your Nemzone. Many of you may know Nemzone over here in Hanoi, which is very famous, but some of you are not very familiar with that. Katerina, if you are here in Hanoi, you should try it. Nemzone is quite innovative spring roll here in Vietnam, and Ms. Ha has started a business a long time ago, and then she finally renovated in 2016, right? And at that time, you chose to work with Ms. Zhang. So the question to you is, why did you choose a female investor? And did you have any male investor, any success or failure, and why?
Thank you, Minh. You know, starting a business owned by women always face difficulties, and especially for those who are married and have children like me. And in addition, women's EQ is always higher than men. I think so. So therefore, choosing female investors will be more advantageous and sympathize. About the next questions, I also have had male investors before, and it failed because at first I clearly expressed my ambition and development orientation. So he was quite interested in the project, but after 1 year, I realized that the development orientation was not suitable in both capacity and business model. So I changed the plan, and you know, it was not like my initial expectation. So he withdrew from the business.
And at that time, as I understand, that your male investor withdrew from the company, and your female investor remain stay with you, and
she's Giang Đỗ. She's Giang Đỗ.
Yeah. Actually, I think that I can understand, because sometimes men are often more aggressive than women, and and they want to see the result fast. Why businesswomen like Ha, as she mentioned, she have family, she have children, and at the first stage of our investment, she even have a third baby. So it's a lot of she needs a lot of understanding, sympathy, and also balance between business and family. The first our initial model is we wanted with the other investor, we wanted to develop a food chain. a food chain. Why Ha and I analyze it and think that it's not, and thought that was not a good time to develop the chain. We want to focus on a single store that with good quality products rather than hastily expand the business. So I think the mindset is different, and the man cannot have patience to see how we slowly develop the business.
Yeah,
So
we don't have a common
maybe
voice
different.
anymore.
Maybe Katerina can share some of the experience, or what do you think about whether we, what's the difference between male investor and female investor?
Okay, that's a difficult question. I will share the experience, my experience, and then see how it fits. I must say, I like your comment that you said that men are often more aggressive and they want to see results faster. This is true. And I think it's also one of the reasons why sometimes male investors get frustrated. Not only male investors, but mostly male investors get frustrated sometimes with female founders because they tend to take longer in terms of agreeing on the business strategy. They grow a little bit more slowly. Sometimes they take longer in terms of even analyzing the terms of the deal, digesting them, making a decision. And so sometimes people get frustrated and they move on. So sometimes deals fall through because of that. And these are actually some of the conversations that came up quite clearly. There was a feminist forum organized by the UN in Bangkok in October this year in 2023. And when they were discussing, even investors that have a clear commitment to getting more women, female founders through their pipeline, they realize that it is a bit of a challenge because it takes more work fundamentally, and time is money. So that's one issue. I think in terms of the experience of female investors, at Epic Angels, as I said, we're all women. It's all women investors, and the idea is really to sort of democratize small investments, so they're open to fundamentally everyone. And as I mentioned before, anybody can pitch. So it's not only women, not only female founders, also male founders and mixed teams. But as you can expect, investors who are all women are actually more interested in supporting female founders. That's quite clear that we see that. Mixed teams are fine, but overall, it's not only simply because women want to support other women, there is an element of that, which I think it's also very good because women tend to get less funding. So it's good to sort of try to balance things off a little. But it's also because, as I mentioned earlier, female founders are clearly more, they're more involved in trying to fix issues that are unique to women, that clearly male founders wouldn't be able to do simply because they don't have that experience. And so I'll give you an example. Every month we have a pitch night where you have like between 3 and 4 businesses that they're presenting, and those businesses have been screened down from around 50 that we get every month, right? And so one that was last month was about was a female founder that was about AI-based epidural. You know, the epidural is basically the pain medication that you put in your spine, and it's mostly 90% of the users epidural is during birth. It's not only, but 90%. So it's fundamentally a very strong, it's a female issue, mostly affects women. So evidently it will be very difficult for a founder to come up with this idea because that's not the experience. You know, that's not something that they have lived, or they might have even knowledge of that, right? But for female investors, when they heard that, they were extremely interested in seeing that there was a female founder that was coming up with this type of solution. And this is just an example. It's the fact that, again, female founders are trying to solve issues that are unique to women, and that right now, still in 2023, have not been answered.
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, thanks, Katerina and Zhang and Ham. It seems that we are having a new trend coming up. Women invest in women, and I see different celebrities. They set up their own funds. For example, Selena Williams. I think she set up the fund to invest in women. As well. So yeah, we can see the conflict, a little bit of conflicts over here in terms of the costs and benefits and also the sympathy for women as well. So let's say that, yeah, there's a big question to Katerina, how to really integrate gender lens into a kind of investment program in a way that is more pragmatic and cost effective as well, because we have a lot of ESO here. They certainly want to hear your answer.
Let's see. Pragmatic and cost effective. I would say there are always some initial cost involved when you are trying to do something new. As I mentioned before, I would say probably the biggest cost at the beginning is trying to collect data and do your market research and understand what type of gender lens strategy makes sense for your business. So even in terms of, for example, if you're working with entrepreneurs, this is a very large market, right? You most likely you have a specific target segment that is your sweet spot, that you are particularly good at reaching, that you serve well, etc. So I would say when you're looking at integrating the gender lens, do that in a way that fits with your business model. If you're very good at, for example, serving SMEs, but not micro, and even within SMEs, small in urban areas or maybe some in rural areas, then just focus on collecting market research, understand the differences between women-owned and men-owned in that particular segment, so that you need to have a sense of the gaps and opportunities. Based on the gaps and opportunity, you can see what makes sense for you and you can integrate it. And the reality of it is that this is I would say the lift is in making sure that you collect and track data throughout. So you fundamentally add new sets of data to your database, and you keep checking, and if you keep making sure that you are on the right track. And if you seems that what you identify originally wasn't really correct, then you kind of need to recalibrate. So I would say that's the pragmatic thing to say. Don't try to do gender lens in something that is not related to your business model. That will be very difficult. Do evidence-based, which means data-based, right? And I guess the pragmatic thing is that you just need to be practical. Also, within an organization, you need to make sure that everybody is on board. So sometimes organizations collect data, but then they don't know what to do with that. They don't know how to analyze it. They don't know the story that is behind the data. And sometimes it just sits with a few people, the ones that collect the data, but it's not explained to everybody else. So then the other people, they just really don't know what that means, what they should do. And so I think if you want to be pragmatic, you just need to make sure everybody's on board and everybody understands that.
Yes, thank you, Katerina. I'll be briefing in Vietnamese. Vâng ạ, thưa các chị, thì ở đây có rất nhiều các tổ chức hỗ trợ mà cũng rất muốn trao đổi xem là vậy thì lồng ghép lăng kính giới vào cái quá trình hoặc các cái chương trình đầu tư và chương trình hỗ trợ của mình như thế nào một cách thiết thực nhất và tiết kiệm chi phí nhất. Thì lời khuyên của chị Katerina là đừng làm cái gì mà nó đi ra khỏi cái mô hình kinh doanh của mình. Cơ bản là chúng ta đều phải nhìn nhận lại mô hình kinh doanh của mình, cho dù mình là một startup hay là một tổ chức hỗ trợ thì phải có một mô hình kinh doanh và tích hợp cái việc này đi song song với cái mô hình kinh doanh đó. Cái điểm thứ hai là để cho nó đảm bảo cái tính thực tế và thực sự hiệu quả của nó thì mình nên thu thập các cái dữ liệu và đưa ra quyết định dựa trên các cái dữ liệu này. Tất nhiên là có rất nhiều trường hợp là mình thu thập rất nhiều dữ liệu nhưng mình không biết làm gì với những dữ liệu này. Cho nên cơ bản là phải có một cái chiến lược sử dụng dữ liệu và chiến lược thu thập dữ liệu. Sau đó thì chúng ta phải biết kể những cái câu chuyện dựa trên những cái dữ liệu này, và khi mà chúng ta có một cái câu chuyện thống nhất thì cơ bản chúng ta cũng biết là sẽ phải thu thập những dữ liệu gì. Và đây cũng là một cái thông điệp rất hay cho những cái tổ chức mà đang muốn đưa các cái yếu tố lồng ghép lăng kính giới vào trong cái bất kỳ một chương trình nào của mình. Có nghĩa là khi chúng ta thực sự quan tâm đến cái gì, chúng ta sẽ đo lường nó và thu thập dữ liệu của nó ngay từ giai đoạn đầu. Vâng ạ. Tôi sẽ tiếp tục chuyển sang chị Giang. So we continue with Ms. Giang from the challenges and benefits side of the thing. What are the challenge and benefit of embedding kind of gender lens approach in investing from your story?
I think in general, all businesses, especially startups, have many challenges. Not only women-led or not only women-led businesses. So for me and her, we have been together from 8 years, right? Yeah, for 7-8 years. I really admire her in that she's very persistent and focused on what she wants to do. And I think that when we decide about investment, we always look at the people, the human resources, and the founders are the core of the business, and the persistent determination as well as the patience in what Ha's doing is really inspire me. And I think that the success of NameZone until now, even we go through the COVID time with many difficulties, but the business is still growing. So I think that as an investors, I will see in the personalities, in the business models, in what we and how the founders and her team grow over time. For the challenges we have many challenges, like we have to change the business model from restaurant-based service in a small restaurant into a delivery-only model. So luckily, we analyzed the market and decided to change the model even before the COVID time. So the NameZone did quite well during COVID time, and keep up with their delivery only business model until now. But then we have to think about the future. So the both, I think that sometimes you have at different times you have when you have the benefits, it doesn't mean that you can carry it on for forever. It can become the challenges in the futures. Like if you stay with that model, how can you develop that model, or should we expand or rethink or adjust the model for the new areas of for the new chapter of the business. For women founders, as Katerina has mentioned, that sometimes we take a lot of time to think and to make decisions. Women generally do not want to take risk, and don't jump into something that she's comfortable with. Sometimes she has to be comfortable. For men, they just jump. Most of the men, they just jump and see what happens next. So because we also invest in, I work with other teams who invest in male only or the management mostly male. So I can compare the decision making of two different groups with different gender group. So I think that sometimes the pro and con depends on a lot on the founders and the founding teams. Yeah. I don't know if I make it clear enough because
I see. I
so
see
many
your
things
point.
to share. It's difficult because if I don't really like sometimes it's even in me I have a conflict in my thinking. I don't have to consider whether it's a women-led business or the business is only benefiting women, and I don't purely make decision on that. I don't really, but I will give it a priority, and I can put sympathy and some understanding, and I think I can work well with them. It can be some of a priority, but at the same time, I will want to the women founders also change the mindset and also think as a business person. It doesn't matter or you are a man or a woman. You are doing business and you have to make decision. And the market out there don't care behind the business you are a man or woman, right?
I see your point.
So so don't I don't think that we should promote. Honestly, I don't think we should promote that there's some differences or some preference of man or woman business.
Okay.
We have to look into the business and encourage either man, women, or even now it's gender neutral. In many business, it's gender neutral, right? So we should promote the business spirit, business spirit inside the founder rather than to take into account the gender.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Zhang. It's also the message from Ms. Zhang to the audience as well from her viewpoints. At the same time, we have Ms. Ha. In fact, she has now created jobs for a lot of women, and the business is becoming more inclusive, while they are recruiting a lot of women, retired women, disadvantaged women, and also disadvantaged people. So do you think that because you have a female investor, you become more inclusive business, huh?
Yeah. I think that I'm a lucky woman because I have a Miss Zhang to accompany with me for a very long time, 8 years, I think so. And I think it was the right decision to choose female investor right now. Anyway, women will be very sympathetic. And Miss Zhang was patient and willing to listen and give me a lot of valuable advice. And Namzone is a business model whose employees are mainly retired women. Investor needs to be patient, understanding, and willing to accompany the business for long-term development. And chị Giang meets all the above factors.
But I think that you make the decision to employ. We talk about how the operations, and because of you know the rolling, we use a lot of human power, and rolling a spring roll need patience and take time, and I think that retired women have decided to hire retired women is a very wise business decision. And at the same time, she's helping the women who need to earn their income. So we meet different criteria or different benefits of not only making money, but we feel also very satisfied. We feel very happy inside, and that's what we share and come to the decision very quickly. I think that if we have a team of another main investor, he may ask about the efficiency, the benefit compared to employ young people with more efficient and faster, more efficient. But for this typical business, what Ha is doing, I think the women is the retired women are very suitable for this business model.
I think the message is quite clear from your case study that women tend to be more empathetic to other women, but also it's also a wise strategy for the business model. Yeah, and the last question would go to Katerina. Very briefly, if you can briefly saying about what kind of mindset should investors or investees should adopt in integrating gender lens, what would it be?
Let's see. I would say the approach is that it's always a combination of profit and impact. So you're not focusing, or you're not looking at gender lens because you don't care about the profit. When you're an investor, you know, profit is always important. Again, as an angel investor, I do both. It's certainly not one or the other. It's both at the same time. I think the approach, and this is also what came out through the conversation, is that because female founders often they seem to exhibit some different patterns. It takes often a little bit longer. That also requires a more patient type of investor, but actually it also takes an investor that understands that these differences, perhaps in the way that women approach investors, or in the way women pitch, in the language that they use, does not mean that they're less capable. It's just oftentimes it's a different ways of expressing themselves. You know, I hear a lot of investors that sometimes they get frustrated because they're used to only male founders. They pitch very aggressively, very almost like blue sky type of projections and forecasts, and then they talk to women, and the women sound so modest in comparison, so they're always disappointed. So I think it's also important to be realistic, recognizes differences, and instead of always trying to fix women, also trying to have a better sense of where they're coming from, and why they might be expressing themselves in a certain way. So there is a lot of gray in between. Again, it might be a language issue sometimes. So I think investors need to be also familiar to that, to be able to appreciate the opportunities.
Yeah, thank you so much, Katerina, Ms. Zhang, and Ha, for very useful discussion and your elaboration on the concept. And now we also have our second, the fourth speaker in the second panel. I'll leave it to Chami for this panel, and welcome Jacqueline Ovens. Are you there, Jacqueline? Can you hear us?
I can hear you all very well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so once again, thank you, and we turn to Chami for the second panel.
Great. Thank you so much, Katerina and Zhang and Ha, for sharing us about your experience and also your story. I think it's a great start with how Katerina gave us some sharing of her experience when she's working in gender lens, the challenges, the benefits of doing gender lens investing, seeing how gender lens actually allows you to see some newer big opportunities in terms of market. So for example, the epidural solution. If normally a male investor might not realize how big of a market that might be, but as a female investor, we are able to see and recognize huge markets that are still not yet solved, that amazing entrepreneurs are out there trying to solve. And through the story of Zhang and Ha, we also see like a very kind of clear story of how a female investor and a female entrepreneur are working together to actually both create amazing lens for eaters like myself, foodies, but also helping retired females to be able to have work and to be able to show that they have amazing skills that they can apply to create great products. So thank you for that. And I think that gives us a great starting point for Jacqueline to give us. So Jacqueline here is the VP of investment of the investment program at the Equality Fund. And Jacqueline will be giving us an introduction to Canada's gender lens investment ecosystem and the activities of supporting organizations. I hope that through this introduction, it can give some of the organizations here some motivation, some inspirations into how we can actually apply interesting and different models into the Vietnamese market. Jacqueline, I'll leave it to you to give us an introduction then.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to join you all, and I hope you can hear me okay. My voice has, it's been a long day, and I'm coming off a cold, so I apologize if my voice is a little hoarse. So I think I really enjoyed some of the discussion that you were engaging in prior to my joining the call. And I think just for your background and awareness, before I go into the background of the Equality Fund, I'll tell you a little bit about what I was doing prior to joining the fund in this past year. So I was also a venture capital investor and I also invested in venture capital funds on behalf of the Canadian government. I had a program that I led where we invested directly into female-led businesses that were exporting businesses in Canada. And we took equity ownership in those companies. And it was a very interesting program because it was, one of a few in the Canadian market. The Canadian ecosystem has, I think, like what many nations, is understanding the potential, the untapped market potential of gender lens investment as a whole, and how to meet and support women entrepreneurs in their local environments. When we were talking about, and I thought it was quite interesting about the example of the epidural, one of my favorite examples of an investment that we looked at and invested in under this portfolio was a company called SheerTex, which was started by a woman who's a chemical engineer here in Canada, in a small town in Ontario. And she came up with a really interesting idea whereby she wanted to create the world's strongest pantyhose. She was fed up of pantyhose and hosiery running and tearing all the time, and thought, why has no scientist or a company ever developed a solution to this problem? And she has developed and marketed and scaled a company called SheerTex, which is now on the shelves and across, one of a huge internet business here in Canada, in the US, in Europe. And she has developed a very strong, resilient product whereby she's using incredible technology that underlines the sort of weaving of the fabrics to create this incredible pair of pantyhose that lasts. It's a miracle. I always liken it to her solving one of the world's greatest unsolved mysteries about why no one's tackled this. So I think it's really interesting to think about how women's perspectives in the world of business has been overlooked for so many years, and the incredible market potential that women have to looking at opportunities, scaling their businesses differently, and really thinking from an inclusive mindset, whether that's intentional or unintentional. So I like to give that as an example because I think it's something that resonates with many women in their understanding of, oh yeah, that's a brilliant idea. Why wouldn't someone have come along and done that? Well, probably because men have no idea how frustrating it is to go through a million pairs of pantyhose. So I'll just give that as an anecdote. So one of the things that I'd like to talk about today, and hopefully we can have an engaging conversation, is about the Equality Fund. So in Canada, the Canadian government, under the Trudeau government in particular, has taken a leadership stance in terms of, one, supporting women entrepreneurs in Canada, and then two, also supporting a feminist foreign policy. And with these two initiatives, it's really created an environment whereby a number of government programs, departmental programs, as well as private sector initiatives have come together to create an ecosystem of gender lens investment within the Canadian environment that really has many different facets. One of those was the Equality Fund. So the Equality Fund was started in 2019 and funded by the Canadian government with $300 million of capital. The intention of that capital was that it would serve as the backbone support for providing a steady stream of sustainable, unrestricted granting to feminist organizations in the global South. So these are nonprofits, charities, women's organizations, feminist activist groups, feminist funders, feminist organizations that are working on the front lines in regions, tackling gender-based violence, reproductive rights issues, women's economic empowerment, etc. Really very tangible and very important work in the work in supporting gender equality globally. But to fund that and to ensure that there was a sustainable source of income to support these grant making, the condition of that capital was that the government wanted that the capital also be invested with a 100% gender lens, and that the endowment effectively and the income generated from that endowment would be what funds the global grant making on an annual basis, alongside philanthropic capital that is raised from family offices, foundations, philanthropists, as well as some other governments that we're working with as well. So what does gender lens investment mean in that context? And as you've discussed so far, it has many different applications and interpretations. And one of the challenges that I think any investor entering this space is where to begin. What is the entry point for gender lens investment? The unique model that we have is that we are investing across asset class. So we have invested in public equities, we've invested in a public fixed income, we've invested in private credit solutions, we've also invested in private equity. And so the approaches that you take to gender lens investment, quote unquote, is going to be different across those various asset classes. Because if I look at, let's say I take Amazon, for example, as a company, well, is Amazon a gender lens investment vehicle or product or investment? Most people would say, well, no, it's just a massive company run by Jeff Bezos. How do you determine what is a gender lens investment in the public markets? Is it a company that's run by a woman? Well, what if that woman is running a company that is producing weaponry that is, supporting and funding conflicts across the world? Is that really a gender lens in type of investment? Or similarly, what if there's a company that is at the forefront of developing technologies in women's care, and as the example was before, but that was run by men? So there's the interpretations that we've used to understand how you can apply a gender lens within the public market sphere is to look at a number of factors. So effectively, it's a scoring system that we use. There is a company called Equileap, which is the largest aggregator of gender data from public market companies. So it will go through the annual reports and it will send questionnaires to those public companies to understand and look at various factors. And then based on those factors, they get a score. And so companies like Amazon, companies like Apple, they are in the top, let's say 80 companies in the world from a gender lens standpoint, because primarily they have women on their boards, they have relatively good gender aligned policies and practices in terms of how the fair working policies they have, and fair wages, as well as anti-harassment policies, et cetera, et cetera. So we look at about, I think it's like 17 or 18 factors that we look at on the public markets scale. But as you would imagine, it's really hard to really conceptualize what it means to do gender lens investments in the public sphere. And so we recognize that while it's not hugely impactful, and it's not where you're going to have the most obvious alignment with working towards gender equality goals and objectives, most investors, their first entry point is into the public markets because it's liquid, it's relatively stable, And there's just massive amounts of capital in those markets for people to have an entry point. And so it just gives an example, I think, to any investor and any pension fund or any wealth manager to understand and think about, well, how can I actually apply a lens to the public markets to think through sort of some gender issues and gender factors? And that's the approach we've taken. On the private side, obviously, you're going to have a lot more impact and influence in terms of how your investment dollars can have impact within how the businesses are being run, and sort of also analyzing what are the businesses that are most aligned with our with gender equality outcomes. So one of the things that we have done at the Equality Fund is we have created our own gender lens investment criteria, which we use as a screen for any future investments that we make in the private capital sphere. So either a private credit, or private equity. And we've really looked at a sort of a holistic approach to understanding that gender lens investment within the private sphere is not just about representation, i.e., it's not just about a woman leading that company or having a number of women on the board. It's about the products and services that they're delivering and how they support women, women, girls, and trans people. We include that within our definition. And then two, are those products and services supporting the thematic sectors which have a disproportionate impact on gender equality? And those are the sectors where, and you may have touched upon this before, but where women are either actively working in those spaces or the active recipients of, I guess, the products and services in those spaces. And so that's the care economy, it's healthcare, it's clean energy, clean water, food security, access to financial products and micro lending. And so we've identified a series of thematic sectoral areas that we curate our investment thesis and screening towards. And then finally, we're trying to understand how we can address structural barriers that are in place within the existing investment communities and practices within various regions, including Canada, including the United States, and the emerging markets regions that we also invest in. And that's really to come out with best practices around the policies and procedures that we feel are at least a minimum baseline that we would want to see companies start to think about and adopt around gender equality. And that is like fair wage and equal pay type policies within organizations, understanding that anti-harassment policies as well, flexible work arrangements. Obviously, and this is not news to any of you around the table, but having flexible work is a critical component of having a successful and engaged women's economic engine within any region. And so we view that as also a really critical part of encouraging a gender equal workforce within an organization. And then finally, again, around representation and governance. Who's sitting around the board? Is it a woman-led business where all of the actual decision makers or board members that govern those businesses and the investors at the table, are they all men? That's not necessarily really seeking towards gender equality. How can we work with the businesses to encourage greater gender equality within the governance structures of those businesses? So using that criteria, we have developed strategies on the private credit side, as well as we're in development right now on a private equity strategy, whereby we will use these criteria in practice to be able to evaluate any future investment opportunities. We've also made this criteria open and available to anyone to download, to review, and to apply within their own investment work. So if they are an investor themselves, an asset manager, they can use this as part of their due diligence screening process. If there's an asset owner, a family office, or a foundation who wants to understand how they could recommend to their asset managers how to apply gender lens, they can also use this criteria. And furthermore, if you are a company and business owner, it's also really, I think, a worthwhile toolkit for you to understand within your own organization how you can become better gender aligned. But also think, well, am I a gender aligned organization in the products and services that I'm delivering? How many of my customers are women and girls? How many of my staff are women and girls? Do I have objectives to trying to encourage to have greater equity within my own organization? So we've tried to take a really holistic approach to that, and encourage anyone to use the gender lens investment criteria as a starting point for discovery. So that's what we do at the Equality Fund. I encourage anyone, if they have any questions, I'm happy to tell you a little bit more about what we do, and tell you a little bit more about the Canadian landscape as well. To Katarina's point earlier, all of these investments, because we use the income from these investments to fund our grant making, a key component, first and foremost, is that they have to be financially returning. They have to be market driven, and they're not what you would call sort of impact first investments, in the sense that it's the returns objectives are a secondary or absent component of the investment thesis. It's really critical that they are financially returning products. So I do recognize that there's a huge field of blended finance products, gender bonds, social bonds, that really work to support and focus on specific outcomes. We are investors in a World Bank gender bond right now. But primarily, I would say most of our portfolio is in traditional asset classes. So I'll leave it there, and I'll turn it back over to you, Tremi.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for sharing that. I know that both Jacqueline and also Katarina and Zhang have all mentioned, I think, the concept of the speed of return of investment, and the return of investment and the impact that the investment might have on gender lens. I was wondering, for the Equality Fund, how do you said that it is a return first investment decision, but so does the return, how do you adjust it with how long you think that the investment time would take to actually give you like an exit?
So that's where portfolio construction comes into play. So when you're looking at the entire endowment and how we've actually allocated capital, the majority will be in liquid assets. So those will be public markets vehicles, so into public companies, because we need to be able to buy and sell them in a liquid market to generate the income and returns for our grant making. We absolutely do take a much more patient approach when it comes to our private capital investments, recognizing that it's sort of in alignment with our mission and goals as a feminist organization, that we are not, while we have an objective for returns first, because we have to use the income to support our grant making, we are ensuring that all of our investments are mission aligned with what our objectives are. And so we do view that patient capital is an important component within the private capital sphere, and that we definitely will have baked into sort of a longer duration cycle in terms of expectation for a return of capital within that aspect of the portfolio. But I would say, like, one of the things that we are focused on is that we have all of that. It can be balanced and managed in a sort of a model, so to speak, right, in terms of timing. But there is an expectation that we will be achieving a financial return at some point.
Sounds great, and thank you for sharing that. I do have a question for you from the audience here, Tung. And Tung shared that it's very difficult and challenging for startups and entrepreneurs who are gender and sexually diverse. And I know that you've touched on it just a little bit earlier on, but Tung's question is, how does gender lens investing intersect with and address challenges faced by the sexual orientation and gender diversity LGBTIQ community in the area of entrepreneurship and business? And maybe you can touch on that first. And then, but there's also the question that in what ways can gender lens investing strategies be adapted to better support social entrepreneurs and businesses led by LGBTIQ community and the SOGIESE diverse?
No, that's a great question. And I can speak to it as well, sort of in my prior role at Export Development Canada, because we also had broadened our focus area from just women to also to an inclusive trade strategy, where we were looking to support underrepresented founders, and that included those who other racialized founders, Black founders, Indigenous founders, as well as those within the LGBTQ+ community, because they are so disproportionately underrepresented in terms of the venture capital dollars that are going to those populations. It's incredibly challenged as an investor to go out with that strategy for a number of reasons. One is that when you're talking with an investor, some may not want to disclose that information to you. It's not necessarily the first sort of discussion point you're going to have with a founder. But I think coming to it with a lens and being open and stating that as one of your core principles around trying to serve and underrepresented groups and being open to diverse founder groups is really key to at least engaging in an open conversation with founders. Because I always approached it as, well, tell me about your journey. Tell me about your journey when I would have conversations with founders. Tell me about your journey to date, the challenges you faced within the fundraising community, the challenges you faced accessing networks, because network is key to being able to understand and really reach out to those with investors with dollars. And, you know, in Canada, a lot of the deals were done on golf courses or, you know, in baseball games or hockey games. And while you may think, well, of course, women are allowed to do those things, but that's not where naturally necessarily you're going to have a lot of women. And I would only imagine even within the LGBTQ+ community as well, you know, the informal socializing that goes on within, or even formal socializing that goes on, may not necessarily be inclusive of those in those communities. So I think network building is really, really key. But being open and stating objectives around your values and missions to wanting to support underserved populations, I think is really critical. So I always really try to engage it as, let's open a dialogue. I want to hear your journey. Interestingly, it also, you know, those were sometimes challenging conversations that I would have with entrepreneurs who were from a racialized community. In Canada, we have a lot of Canadians that are from originally from Asian communities in Canada who are either naturalized citizens or longstanding citizens of Canada. And while we had a policy to supporting racialized communities, well, did that mean supporting those who came or who had immigrated from Asia, even though they didn't necessarily really show up as an underrepresented group within the venture capital community, which was challenging. So I think my approach to that, and I would get a lot of questions from people within my own team about that question, is like, well, let's hear about what their journey is. Like, you may not understand the obstacles that people have faced in being able to access and have conversations, and the discrimination that they may have undergone within sort of their journey of starting their business, accessing suppliers, working with customers. And it's really critical to sort of be open in that mindset, because investor and founder relationships, I liken them to marriages, right? They are not sort of, especially on the equity side, I would say, these are long-term partnerships. You may be together for better, for worse, for many, many years. And you cannot, I can't really think of very, very few relationships where there isn't a personal connection between an investor and a founder that builds over time. And it's really critical that there is sort of just an open awareness and understanding of people's personal situations. And I think that that's sort of fundamental to at its core, whether it's stated or unstated. So really, you know, I liken it to understanding someone's journey as the best starting point to engage in those conversations.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Jacqueline. I think you did touch on the fact that, so I know that in Canada, there are probably it's a whole ecosystem supporting genderland investing and genderland businesses. So I was wondering if you could touch on maybe a few other models that you have been seeing that you think would be interesting for Southeast Asia and especially Vietnam to consider.
Sure. So within the venture capital community, there are a handful of relatively new, I would say early stage, seed, pre-seed, Series A venture funds that are specifically focused on supporting women. So that is within their investment screening practices that they undertake to invest in female-led businesses. What's interesting, and some of the trends that I saw was, and you know, perhaps this follows on Katarina's work as well, is that many of them were born out of really women coming together who were angel investors or who wanted to invest in women. And these would be very successful executives in their own right, coming together, wanting to really create a movement around supporting women and standing up women-led businesses, because they saw within their own environments how successful and entrepreneurial women can be, but really wanted to provide the funding models that was necessarily to get them off the ground. And so within the Canadian community, there are several formal and informal angel networks that are supporting women-led businesses. Those have been sort of created a feeder channel of businesses that are funded at the early stage to seed stage venture capital community. And then in terms of sort of going on from there, in terms of the Series B stage investing, there are, to my knowledge, there aren't any sort of investments. Well, there's one. There's the Business Development Bank of Canada that has a fund that's focused on tech investments, and they will do Series B, Series C investing, but there's not a ton. But you know, a lot of the arguments will be made is that, well, once they get to that stage of business, then they should be able to not have trouble finding investment from other investors. But that's debatable. But nonetheless, but a lot of this, I would say, has been in terms of the genesis as well as the scaling of this environment has been supported by a lot of government funding. So the government, through various initiatives, has been very active in supporting this investment community as a whole. And so in addition to funding their own investment agencies within, so they have the Business Development Bank, as well as the Export Credit Agency, which they have specific programs for women entrepreneurs. They've also created various funding models, which are meant to catalyze the overall venture capital sphere as a whole. And it's effectively matching funds. So the government will commit to putting $50 million towards a handful of venture funds that are focused on diversity, environment, et cetera, with the expectation that if they're able to raise a matched amount from private capital, they will commit the capital to those organizations. So that has been a very successful initiative that the government has undertaken to really bolster and grow the venture capital community in Canada. And then finally, I would say within the informal sphere, I think what the feedback that I hear from the fund managers that I invested in is that the women entrepreneurs that have been funded within these funds have created their own informal networks of support. And that when they become successful, they themselves want to go on and support other women. And it's creating this flywheel effect, which I'm sure that you see in your own communities as well, whereby, but it's hard to measure, but it's so incredibly impactful because it's not just about financial support, it's about network building. It's about sharing the challenges and the opportunities, as well as sort of the different pathways within this whole crazy sphere of trying to raise and start a business and grow a business, and how challenging it can be. And so by creating these funds that have a specific gender focus, it's created a community of investment or of entrepreneurs that are coming together and supporting each other and building up each other and sharing, about how to encourage their staff, how to find new relationships, how to do business differently. So it's really, really interesting to see how just naturally the ecosystems grow on their own.
Thank you so much. I do have a question for you from Tunming here from the audience. And Tunming is asking how the Equality Fund is reaching out to other parts of the world. Is there a plan for that? And how do you see it coming forward in the next few years?
So in terms of investment, we don't just invest, actually, we don't really invest much in Canada. Most of our investments are outside of Canada. We have invested in a handful of private equity funds as a limited partner. So we are not directly investing in businesses at this moment. We don't have really the team or the vehicle to do so at this moment. But we are also looking at trying to stand up a private equity strategy and support as an anchor investor in a private equity fund that would initially, we may have to focus on one or two specific regions just because that's where the team will probably be based. But effectively, the objective is to scale that platform going forward such that we can really support markets in regions and provide that regional expertise and going forward. So that's a very long-term plan. I recognize it's not necessarily sort of the dollars out the door immediately, but we really view ourselves as a catalytic player within the field of gender lens investment, and we want to encourage and bring alongside other investors and asset managers into this sphere and really sort of grow it and illustrate the importance. The other thing I would say is that all of our grant making is done in the Global South. So we do have teams. We do not grant within Canada. We grant in the United States. We grant to Global South organizations, as those are where the pressing needs around gender equality from a feminist activist and feminist organization standpoint are situated. And so we are actively granting to organizations in Africa, in the Middle East, in Asia, in Latin America, and South America, and we have team across the world. Our programs are actively working. What I would say is, I think there's an opportunity going forward, and there's a strategy to be built as we've gone through our own design and build phase. That as the organizations that we're supporting are on the ground, how can we bridge the investment work that we're doing with the programmatic work that we're doing as well? And can we develop a program stream that's really supporting women entrepreneurs in region with either financing or mentorship or advice or technical assistance, etc. So that is something that I think will naturally come to play over time, given the fact that we have such wide distribution in terms of the work we're doing on the grant making side, and we have the ability to invest on a global scale.
Thank you for sharing that, and I'm excited to see how the Equality Fund will be reaching out to the different parts of the world and kind of carrying out the catalytic power that you actually have to continue supporting gender lens investing as well as gender diverse industries and businesses. So I think that we are nearly at time right now. So I'll leave it back to Ming to maybe say the last few words and wrapping up the session.
Yep. Thank you so much, Jacqueline, for your for the great inspiration. I think we are inspired so much by your sharing. I just want to briefly translate some of the points to Vietnamese so that our audience here will catch your point as well. Chị Jacqueline Evans thì là từ cái quỹ gọi là Equality Fund, và đây là một cái tổ chức phi chính phủ hoạt động ở Ottawa, đặt ở Ottawa nhưng mà là hoạt động trên phạm vi toàn cầu. Và chị cũng có chia sẻ về rất là nhiều các cái cách tiếp cận, nhưng mà trong đó có một số các cái thông tin tôi tin là sẽ rất hữu ích với các bạn. Thứ nhất là nó ở vai trò một cái quỹ Equality thì cũng có những cái chiến lược riêng, và họ lựa chọn đầu tư vào các quỹ PE chứ không đầu tư trực tiếp vào các doanh nghiệp, và từ các quỹ PE này thì họ sẽ đầu tư vào các cái nhóm doanh nghiệp của quỹ đó. Tiếp theo đấy là trong cái quá trình đấy thì họ sẽ nâng cao nhận thức của, thực ra là chia sẻ cái góc nhìn về gender lens. Thì với tất cả những cái quỹ này, và cũng như là hiện nay trong cái bối cảnh của equality thì cái đối tượng nó sẽ có những cái mở rộng hơn, không chỉ là phụ nữ mà còn có cả trẻ em gái và những người chuyển giới. Ngoài ra thì chị Jacqueline cũng cho một cái lời khuyên tôi thấy cũng rất hữu ích, đấy chính là thật ra thì khi mà chúng ta lựa chọn cái việc là cái lồng ghép lăng kính giới này nó phù hợp và nó đi song hành với doanh nghiệp của mình thế nào, ta cũng nên suy nghĩ là vậy thì sau khi mình làm cái đó thì sẽ có bao nhiêu khách hàng, bao nhiêu nhân sự, bao nhiêu những cái sự công bằng có thể tạo ra. Thì thật ra nếu suy nghĩ như vậy thì cái góc nhìn nó sẽ rất là thực tế, và chúng ta sẽ thấy rằng là nó sẽ không tách rời khỏi các cái công việc hoặc là mô hình kinh doanh mà chúng ta đang thực hiện. Vâng ạ, và tôi nghĩ rằng là với cái tầm nhìn như thế này thì Equality Fund cũng sẽ tiếp tục mở rộng ra phạm vi toàn cầu, và sẽ lựa chọn một số các cái khu vực mà ở đâu đó cái nhu cầu về bình đẳng giới nó sẽ lớn hơn và nó đang gặp vấn đề nhiều hơn, thì họ sẽ có những cái lựa chọn. Và đây có thể cũng là một gợi ý cho các tổ chức đang hoạt động hỗ trợ các doanh nghiệp. Đấy chính là đôi khi chúng ta phải lựa chọn những vùng mà tạm coi là vùng trũng trong cái việc cân bằng về giới, để từ đó thì lựa chọn can thiệp hoặc hỗ trợ, hoặc là có những cái chiến lược đầu tư hoặc là matching fund phù hợp. Thì tôi nghĩ là đây là một số các cái điểm chính trong chia sẻ của chị Jacqueline. Và yeah, once again, we would like to thank you so much, the speakers today. Really inspiring and also very insightful stories from you. We hope to update you with more case studies from Vietnam later on, and we have been connected to you via LinkedIn. We hope that ASEAN market is a new destination for Equality Fund, and also Katharina, you will be traveling to Vietnam more, so that we will have more opportunities to have exposure to your experience and story. At the same time, we would like to thank Ms. Giang Do and Ms. Ha again for your local story, which is really inspiring, and also we hope to have more stories like that in the near future. Thank you, Chami, for your great facilitation, and thank you, Ling, for hosting us. I think the event has come to the end, and we hope to see you very soon in the upcoming events of Vietnam Canadian Forum Exchange. Yep, thank you. Wish you a very good day ahead.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, and good night, Katharina and Jacqueline.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, bye-bye.